everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. Now, if you had a chance to talk to somebody you really admire because of all the things they do in this world, how they show up, how they serve, how they give, and you had the chance to sit down with them and have a conversation, would you do it? Yes, you would. And I get a chance to do that today with one of my favorite people in podcasting. Anytime I see his name on a podcast episode, whether it's his own or someone else's, I press play. It's a guarantee. I'm going to do it. And not only is he a great human, he has a great name. Alex Sanfilippo is here as well. I'm so glad to have him on the show. Excited to have a conversation with Alex. Alex, welcome to the How to Podcast series as my guest co-host. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Dave, thank you so much. I've been enjoying the show, listening to it and following you along the way. And again, so thankful to be here and excited to add some value together today.
It's great. It's great. Again, I'm thrilled to have you here. You have a great service for podcasters. I want to touch on that right off the bat because I use it. I think it's awesome. I found some great guests for my shows, all my different shows, through your site. Please tell us more about PodMatch. Let's talk about that off the top.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for the platform to be able to do that. It's always an honor. Back in 2020, my wife and myself and one other business partner launched a tool called PodMatch. And the whole idea was we were just realizing that hosts were having trouble finding ideal guests and vice versa. Guests were having trouble finding the ideal host. Now I say ideal because in today's world, there's a bunch of people who would like to be on your podcast, most of which, no offense, are just not qualified. They're not the right fit, but they're just looking to get on shows, right? We're like, how do we stop that from happening and put the right people together faster? And so we had this idea for what is now PodMatch. And simply put, it's a service that works very similar to a dating app, like connecting people for dates, right? But instead of connecting for dates, it connects people for podcast interviews. So if you're a guest that, like in this case, talks about podcasting, which is a little bit meta, but it would connect me with Dave saying, hey, the How to Podcast series that Dave hosts is probably a good fit for you because you are a podcaster who talks about podcasting. And again, I know it's a very meta example, but that's the whole idea behind what we decided to build. And then just everything in between that's administrative, could we remove the friction that's involved to simplify the process? And the whole heart behind that is that we know that what really matters in podcasting is impacting the lives of listeners. The amount of time spent finding the guest and host, making the connection, all the administrative work doesn't really matter. What matters is who's hearing it and how it's affecting their lives. And we're like, can we make that the highlight and the majority of the time spent doing that versus all the little functions of making sure this email got sent, the calendar invite got sent, and all that stuff. So that's the whole heart and idea behind PodMatch. And it's been an absolute blast. And thank you, Dave, for using it. It really means a lot.
I've met some amazing people through PodMatch. I always like to shout out PodMatch when I make those connections because I want people to know this episode is a result of PodMatch, and it probably wouldn't have happened, to be quite honest. I wouldn't have met these people had it not been for your platform, so I really enjoy that. Thank you for that. PodMatch does more than just guesting, though. There's a lot of other things that you have. You have some great stats for podcasters, which I love. You've got some great tools on there that complement what you do as well. And you kind of expand on some of the other things that are kind of adjacent to PodMatch?
Yeah, sure. The first thing you mentioned there is some of the data and stats, and that's actually public. So if you're listening to this and you're a podcast guest host or aspiring, if you go to podmatch.com/report, you can see a lot of this data that otherwise is really not available. And I really like this because every month we update it and we get really cool feedback that comes through, which is always, I was going to start a podcast, but decided not to because there's too many, until I realized the reality of it and when I checked your report. And so we love hearing stuff like that. People are like, I was about to give up, and then you showed me the reality of podcasting. And that's the whole idea, the reality of podcasting for independent podcasters. We don't focus on the Joe Rogans of the world or any of those bigger shows. Not there's any problem with them. It's just that's a different group of people. And when we compare ourselves, the general population of podcasting, it can get really dangerous. So we want to build a report that had independent guests and host in mind. And then inside of PodMatch, there's some other statistics that actually highlight based off of that and can give people some really good understanding of kind of like where they fit in this whole podcasting ecosystem. Beyond that, we have something called workflows, which Dave, I'm just going to say it here. That's my favorite thing I'm ever going to build or be part of. I'm a really organized person. I love SOPs, standard operating procedures. And so we built this thing called workflows, which helps host be able to just manage their production workflow. If basically the way it works is you create a template or you use one that we have, you hit add episodes, and it gives you a glorified checklist of all the things that need to happen, including assigning team members, adding notes, a way to comment, a way to do all the things in between it. If you just go to a search engine, type in workflows by PodMatch, you can see like a full demo I did of it. But that's really, for me, one of my favorite things I think that I've ever used. We use it for too many things, not beyond podcasting as well, just because it's so easy and we really enjoy it. So those are some of the things inside of PodMatch that we've been able to offer freely to everyone who's using it.
Another thing I love that you do and your team does is you have your own podcast as well. You bring in so many great voices in podcasting space. We have an event coming up soon as well, which is amazing. I think you have Tom Webster coming on, which I'm excited about. Tell us a little bit about your show and the fact and how you do it, because I find it very unique. You do this event, you break it up into episodes and you release them for us. I love how you kind of structure your podcast. Tell us more about your show.
Yeah, like you, Dave, I'm big on community. And you've talked about that on the show and just with me even. The idea here is like having the wisdom and counsel of many. And I find when we bring people together, it doesn't necessarily grow our individual influence, but collectively, it helps elevate an industry. And I'm really passionate about that. So we have the podcast, which is the replay of our live event. It's called Podcasting Made Simple, is the name of the show. And the event's called Podcasting Made Simple Live. Try to make it really simple. So basically, this event that comes up every quarter, it's a live virtual event where we have pre-recorded sessions, but the speakers are there. So they'll introduce themselves, we'll show their video, and then right afterwards, they're on stage. We bring other people on stage who have questions for them. And we just kind of do it really quick and make it like a really fun, very interactive event. And then the next 13 weeks after the event are the replays, which we don't even call them replays. It's just if you're only listening to the podcast and you weren't at the event, you'd really have no idea. We try to make it really seamless and stuff like that. But it has just been a blast. And like you said, Tom Webster is going to be joining us at this next one, who his mind is just so different than mine when it comes to podcasting. I was like, man, I'm growing just from interviewing this guy. So super excited about that. And again, we just love bringing people together. And so that's a really big part of what we do.
Okay. Kind of the premise for my show, Living the Shadow, that's one of my shows. How to Podcast Series is the idea is that we want to create a space where everybody feels welcomed in the podcasting world. I imagine going to the local amusement park and they have that sign saying you must be this tall to ride this ride. There's some signs in podcasting that I'm finding people are posting, which seem to not encourage everyone to be a part of podcasting. And I want to tear those signs down, Alex. I have many different ones. Like, for example, you have to have a certain microphone and it has to be that microphone or don't bother showing up. Like, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of ways to do podcasting. And I want to encourage people that have a message, have a story, that there's a space for you here. Yes, come with what you have, but you can always grow. You can always get better, but come with what you have. You don't have to meet a certain requirement or height requirement as it would be in an amusement park to be in part of podcasting. Are there any signs that you see in podcasting that you would love to tear down that just seem to keep some people away from being a podcaster?
Yeah, the biggest one I see, and the one that really makes me the most sad, is when someone says, I don't have enough influence. Or another people say is, people don't care what I have to say. And I immediately get sad because I wonder, I'm like, who fed this lie to you? Like, who fed this lie to you? When I got started in podcasting, I was feeling that exact same way. And it finally just hit the point of like, I don't know, Dave, like deep conviction for me to finally post an episode. And like, I'm a man of faith, and the only way I can describe it is I felt like Jesus said, Alex, you need to do this. And so I did it. Nervous as all get out. I didn't tell anybody. I just posted it, right? And I'm like, all right, God, I listened to you, kind of, right? Like, and so I just posted. But eventually, I just remember, like, it must have been a week after I posted that first episode, somebody asked me a question that was exactly in line, like a friend did. It was over text, exactly in line with what I recorded the episode about. So I was like, guess I'll send them this. It was only like 12 minutes long. So I sent it to them. I'm like, hey, I just recorded this. I hope it helps. And in my head, I'm like, they're going to think it's stupid. It's dumb. No one wants to hear me. Right. And that's not what happened. Instead, someone said, this is so good. Me and some other friends were just talking about this. I'm going to send it to them as well. And it kind of turned this thing where people started sharing it. And not that it boosted me, making me feel like, oh, you know what? I do have a message. Let me realize, oh, we all have something to share. And we can all help somebody else on their journey. And so for me, the biggest thing I want to get rid of in podcasting is people saying, oh, I'm more or less not worthy of this. And that's the biggest thing I'm always after. I'm like, that is just not true. Whoever's fed you that lie in your life, whether it be a parent, people that you've worked with, whatever it is, it's just not the case, because we all have the ability to help and serve somebody. I know that's a big problem to overcome. And then I find that problem, though, shows up in what you said. Well, I have the wrong microphone. Well, my background isn't what yours is. And right, there's all these different excuses we make, but the core of it is like, hey, I'm probably not the right person for this.
What is one success metric that you do strive for your podcast? What is one thing that you kind of watch carefully and you measure, and it is something that's really important to you? What is that success metric for you?
Hearing from people that listen. And it's kind of hard to quantify. And I suppose I could do much better with it. As long as I'm hearing from people, though, that have listened to it and were impacted by it, and I can open some sort of conversation to learn a little bit from them as well, I'm really happy with it. So I'm not one to look at our statistics. Matter of fact, we made them public. So anyone who's listening, watching this, however you're consuming it, if you go to podmatch.com/episodes, there is a button there that shows you our stats publicly. We use something called OP3. It's not our software. Someone else designed it. It just allows your stats to be 100% public. And a lot of people have been like, Alex, why are you showing that information? That's like the secret sauce. You don't want people to know. I'm like, no, if it helps or people are more interested in it than I am, it's there, right? For me, when I'm wondering, I'm like, hey, did this impact Dave? Did Dave reach out to me and say, hey, this was really helpful for me today. Here's why. And can I open a conversation around that? That's the metric I look at. And because my podcast is about podcasting, I'm not looking for people's lives to necessarily be like changed and then be like, I did a full 180 in life. I stopped drinking because of you, right? Like my show is not that one. But if someone's like, hey, this encouraged me to do more in podcasting or to shift my perspective. I even had someone say this encouraged me to stop podcasting. And I was like, that's great. If this told you that you don't have to do this and it was a burden, that's great news. And so for me, that's the number one metric for me is, can I talk to someone who's listening? Can I hear from them? Are they actually mentioning it? Real quick, what about you though? Like, I'd love it. What is it for you?
I encourage podcasters to not look over the heads of their listeners to the empty seats behind them and go, oh, I wish it was a more response. You know, I released an episode, I have 5 listens. I guess I'm not good at podcasting. And I'm like, wait a minute. You have 5 people who picked you over everything else in the world. And I can't imagine walking up to you do a lot of speaking on stage, Alex. You walk up to the podium, you walk up to the mic, and you look out at the crowd and go, oh, it's only 20 people here. I'm sorry, everybody. Let's cancel this. I'm sorry. I don't want to waste your time. You know, I was expecting 300 people and there's only 20. So I'll give you back your time and you can go do something else. Those 20 people are there for Alex Sanfilippo and they want to connect with you and they're part of your community. Why would you ever dismiss them? Like, don't worry about the size of your audience. Worry about the connection with your audience. And it's a lot easier to build on a smaller scale and build real, true, meaningful connection with your community when you have 5 people who listen to your show. You have 100,000 people listening to your show. How are you going to ever connect with them all? That's impossible. So celebrate the small. And I encourage all the podcasters that I work with to podcast for an audience of 1. Because in that sense, you are focused on that one single person. And if only one person ever listens to your show, what if that one person does something different in life? I did a little mini series called the Appleseed series, and you'll probably appreciate this one, Alex. When you cut open an apple, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. So there is unlimited potential with that one listen for that person to go home and treat their partner better, to treat their children better, to get that promotion at work, because they've listened to your show and they have a new way of thinking. That new way of thinking will have a ripple effect into their lives, into their community, in their family, in their home. People's lives will be different because you showed up at the mic. Back to your example. You recorded an episode, you put it out there and went, I don't know. I don't even know if anyone's going to care about this. But somebody did. And had you not been faithful to that tap on the shoulder to do the thing, that person's life might not be where it is today. So you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. So be okay with the one listen. It's okay. You might be changing the whole world with one person. Don't worry about the 100,000. They'll come. They'll come later. Just focus on the one.
Man, that is so good. I want the soundbite of that. I mean, what you said though, like stop looking at the empty seats behind your listeners, like that. I wrote it down. Like that's just so powerful, and that impacting one person. I mean, think about it. Like I'll use a modern day example. Elon Musk. Somebody at one point told that person that he was worthy of greatness, right? Like so if you're the guy who's like, yeah, I'm basically the one who kind of put him on the pedestal, like, and obviously it takes a tribe, right? But like, I'm the one who kind of showed him that he was capable of this. No one's like, oh, he didn't impact 100,000 people's lives, so no big deal, right? The people are like, oh, wow, that's a lot. But everyone has that potential. So, sorry, I don't mean to just like go right back and back and forth on this topic. I know we got to keep on moving forward, but that is just powerful. I encourage anyone hearing this, go back, I don't know, 2 minutes and listen to what Dave said again, because that is powerful stuff.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage podcasters that look at they're low numbers and think that they're not a success in podcasting. And that's back to the success metrics. Again, you connect with one person in a meaningful way. You can't measure that impact. There's no way. You can't figure out a way to capture that really. So be okay with it. Do your best. Show up for that one person. Build a bridge with them. Like really call them out. I did something on one of my shows. I had a new listener for 5 episodes, and I noticed they were in Germany. So I'm like, hey, just before we start, I just want to call out this person. I have somebody new listening in this city in Germany. Just wanted to say hi. Thanks for listening to the show. I noticed you listened to the last 5 episodes. If you're ever interested, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to meet you. And about 3 weeks later, I get a SpeakPipe message. Shows up in my inbox. I have no idea who it's from. I click play, and it's like, hey, hi, Dave. I'm your listener in Germany. I just wanted to say hello. It was so funny that you called me out. I just felt I had to reach out to you. Thanks. Thank you. It was so cool. And then, like, that's it. That's how you do it. You just call them out and give them an opportunity to reach out, build that bridge. So
good.
Now we're friends.
I love it. That is amazing. What a cool story.
So that's what we can do in podcasting. I'm doing an episode right now based on I hit pause to come to speak with you today, Alex, but it's all around audience versus community. And the fact that an audience, think of a movie theater, all the seats face the screen. You don't know 5 rows behind you who that person is, and you don't know who 3 rows in front of you. We're all focused on the screen. But if we could take those same chairs, unbolt them from the floor, spin them around so we could see each other, that's community compared to audience. And that we really need to be focused more on building community than building audience. Mm-hmm. So how can you do that? Little things like doing virtual things. I do a meetup group on Saturdays where I get podcasters together and we talk podcasting, get to talk to each other face-to-face online. Anything like that goes beyond the show, that complements the show, I think is something we could leverage. So that's kind of one thing I'm really kind of focused in on currently. And I'd love to kind of develop that thought for podcasters so that you can build your community beyond just having a listening number. I think we can do better in that space too.
Yeah, and people listen. The other benefit is people stay around longer when they're part of a community. And I always like to say it that community is formed in circles, not in rows. So anything you do, you want to build it to be a circle, right? So that's great.
Exactly. That's it. I love that. Talk to as well. I'm really curious about your podcast network. When I hear the word network, I think of a big machine that takes your content and spits you out as the host, and you lose your show maybe because they give it to someone else. There's all kinds of things that can happen in what's traditionally a big monster network. You're creating something different with PodMatch and through PodMatch. Curious to know how this works. I've had people ask me specifically about how it works. I'm like, hang on, I'll ask Alex. He'll answer it for you. Can you talk a little bit more about how the network works and like how does somebody even get to be a part of this?
Yeah, sure. I've had a lot of people ask as well. When we first started the idea of the network, I was getting kind of fed up by hearing people be like, oh man, I just left a network. I got like really burned. And like, I heard that again and again. And sometimes it was bigger shows, like friends I have that are in that like top 1 percentile, right? The ones that are getting millions of people listening every month. And they're like, man, I just got really burned by this. They never paid me. They had all these demands. And I was just like, man, I can't help that. But the indie podcasters, is there something else we can do here? So I posted first off to see if anyone would be interested in the idea of a network. So I just was like, hey, I posted it. Here's like a little form if anyone is interested. And in one day, I'll never forget the number because it like stuck with me, but 607 people filled out the form in 24 hours saying they want to be in. And I was like, okay, I didn't ask for any information. I was just like, yes or no, basically. And everyone was like, yes. So then I said, okay, what would you want? And I was shocked because I thought people were going to be like, I want big monetization strategies. I want this platform, this, right? The main thing people wanted was number one, community. What we just talked about. They wanted to feel like, can I meet another podcaster somehow, right? Is there some way we can kind of do this thing together? And two, they wanted to maintain creative freedom, but be part of a group, an organization, a cohort where they felt like they had this similar convictions, mindsets, all that, right? But they wanted to maintain their creative freedom. And I was shocked because I was like, I thought number one was going to be monetization followed by show growth, right? Like, and don't get me wrong, those were on the list, but much, much lower than this aspect of community and keeping the creative freedom. And so that was kind of my green light to say, you know what, let's just see if we can build something out here. And so if anyone's interested in seeing it, it's podmatch.com/network. There's also an apply button, which has all the details about it. But I was like, can we let these podcasters keep their creative freedom and just bring them into this community element? And because we have PodMatch, we're able to offer a few things inside the software to help, to add value, to serve them, to show them, hey, here's how we've been able to grow, right? Very organically. Here's how we've been able to monetize in a very simple way that doesn't take a lot of our time. And so we just decided to do it that way. And we're not even requiring cross promotion, nothing that requires extra work for the podcaster at all. And at the end of the day, I do hope that when we have a very ambitious goal of reaching 1,000 podcasters in it that are doing a lot of content. So people that, like you, who have figured out how to somehow do more than one episode a week. I don't know. I don't even want to know how much you do. It stressed me out. But the idea was just like, can we then take, hey, we've got 1,000 people here. Can I go to a bigger brand and say, hey, we've got 1,000 podcasts and 800 of them agreed that they would be interested in doing something with you. What can we do? And on the PodMatch side, because it's built into our software, we don't want to keep even $1 of that. We want to be able to say, hey, they gave us $100,000 to split among the 700 podcasts that are interested in running this for the next 3 weeks or whatever it might be, right? And I really don't know what that looks like yet, but because it's tied into our software, we don't need to be part of it and say, we need our 40% cut, right? And I need you all to do it this way. We're just going to give the creative freedom. And I'm rambling here a little because it's very new, so I'm still like learning to articulate it, but I'm really passionate about it because I think that there's really something here. And based off the amount of people that are reaching out, wanting to be in it, I think we're going to be able to add a lot of value together with it.
Okay. Is there something that your network isn't on purpose? Like we are not going to do this for sure.
Yeah. The biggest thing is we're not going to have any say in the content that is being created. Now, we might not let you in the network if we really feel it's against where the community is going, right? But we're not going to say, okay, now you're in it. All right, Dave, no more talking about podcasting because we already got a show on that, right? Like we're not doing that type of thing. We want to just help elevate that freedom that they have and do our best to be a partner in it, to be that community. So we're not going to ever dictate what we want people to do. And also we'll never require any sort of cross promotion. So there's never like a time where you say everyone has to run this ad for Dave's podcast so it can grow and then we'll do it with someone else's show. Yeah. We're just not going to get into that. Nothing that requires extra production from hosts. We're not looking to add more work. We're looking just to add value.
Let's jump back to PodMatch in general terms overall as well for somebody new who has not experienced PodMatch yet. What would be your introductory bumper sticker for PodMatch? How would you explain somebody, so as they're driving down the road and it's on the back of your car, what does it say on your bumper sticker for PodMatch?
Yeah, for the host or the guest, and we do have those two avatars.
Let's do both. Okay. Let's do both.
So we'll start like if you're the host, you're driving behind me. Yeah. I got my bumper sticker, right? Or we're in an elevator. What I'm going to say is it's going to simplify the entire booking process. If you have an interview-based show. So it'll help connect you with that right guest really fast. It'll take email out of the equation because you can do all of it right inside the software, and you'll get all of your guest information. You won't have to like ask them for pictures, ask them for links. All that's just going to be there. So the idea is we want to save on average. We actually did a report on this and we asked a lot of people on average, every time you're doing a booking through PodMatch, it saves 14 emails back and forth and about 3 hours of administrative work for the average podcaster. For you, Dave, I feel like you figured it out. It might save you 2 minutes, but like for most people, it's going to really, it's going to save a lot. So the idea is let's just streamline this process with the whole end goal of getting you in front of your listener faster so you can spend more time adding value and serving them.
Okay. And then for the guest?
For the guest, listen, there are so many people wanting to be guests on podcasts in today's world. And it's getting tough out there. And people are always like, man, I feel like I'm sending DMs on every platform. I don't hear back, or I hear back and they have 300 questions. The idea is for a guest, opt into a system where someone who has a podcast is there saying, I am looking for guests. Like you've already done most of the work right there. It's just by being somewhere where it's clear these podcasts are saying they're looking for guests, and then find the ones that are well aligned. Like learn really quickly who it is that they serve and if you can actually help serve that audience. And same thing, it's going to save a lot of administrative time. The host isn't going to need a lot of information from you because you've already filled out your media one sheet, which is your profile on PodMatch. And so it's got it all there. So you'll get more bookings. Not that I think more is necessarily better. It'll give you a higher quality return on investment of your time because your time is very well spent by using a software like this.
In podcasting world right now, we kind of have a snake eating its own tail thing going on with AI, where people are putting content out, it's being recycled and repurposed and spit back out as a new result. We're kind of doing this circle thing with our content happening. You did something recently. We mentioned before we hit record that you're going down a path with the AI world, and as far as it relates to podcast guesting and hosting and all of that. And you've kind of shared something with me that I'd love to kind of wrap up our conversation with, Alex. I could have you on all day, but can you kind of walk us down the path of the question you're posing, the thought you're putting out into social media right now, and let's kind of unpack that a little bit for the listener.
Yeah. First and foremost, my stance with AI is it's good, it's helpful, as long as it's not your direct communication. Like what I'm not going to do, Dave, is after this, write you a thank you email, which I will reach out and say thank you, but I'm not going to tell AI to do that for me because I think that takes the human connection out of it. Now, if you want to use AI to build a blog post, to come up with a title, a description, that's great. To help you come up with the introduction you might want to do, I love all that stuff. Where I don't like it is direct communication, but I also don't like it with direct teaching or direct community building or anything like that. And what we're recently seeing is there's a service called Notebook LM, and it's a Google product that allows you to basically feed something in the system and it will turn it into a podcast, or maybe they don't even call it a podcast, maybe just call it a conversation, where basically it can act as a host. And it's getting really smart. It's actually able to interview people. And recently there's, in the last 24 hours, 5 different people have come up to me or text me, called me, emailed me, whatever it is, right? Or not, even one of them I saw it myself was a podcast using this service and interviewing guests, but the guests not knowing there was AI they were talking to. And so it's like, to me, like that blurs, like, listen, if you want to talk to an AI in a podcast and be the guest, cool. But I think that really needs to be disclosed that you're not talking to a human. The craziest thing is the one that I saw, this AI was going to social media, DMing people. It wasn't a human doing it. So all AI, inviting them on, doing the pre-call, having the conversation, and doing all the work completely automated. Blog post, everything. From start to finish, there was no human involvement at all. Whoever is figuring that out is using more than Notebook LM or whatever it's called. They're using a whole bunch of tools, but they're figuring out how to do something that literally pulls the human element out of it. And listen, I don't know if the guests are knowing it or not, or if listeners can figure that out because it's not mentioned anywhere. But the reality is, like, is there the same connection? I think no, but I don't know. And I just don't know from like a morality standpoint how I feel about that. I mean, that makes it sound extreme, but based on what I just shared, Dave, like, do you have any initial thoughts? Because I'm still like hashing this out in my own mind right now.
Yeah, I love tools. I'm anything that helps us do better with a limited time frame for as a podcaster. Awesome. That's great. Leverage those, learn how to use them properly, use whatever works for you. But yeah, when you take the human element out of there, I think that's the one thing beautiful about podcasting is it is two humans having a conversation and that connection, right? That's the one thing that's going to fight against all the vanilla results in podcasting and in content creation. When people leverage AI to the extreme and take the human element out, you get a lot of vanilla coming back. And I think when I walk into an ice cream aisle, I like choice. I like to know that there's something more than just one type of ice cream. So I love the human element of podcasting. And as long as we don't lose that piece, I'm going to fight for that as much as possible because I want to connect with a person. I'm not really wanting to connect with my desktop computer. As much as I love my computer, really, we don't have a great relationship. So I want to connect with a person. So that's kind of my only caution. And I do I agree with you. I think it's something that needs to be disclosed because, again, if you're under this assumption that this is a human interaction and it's not, are we being led astray a little bit? I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, me neither. My other thing is what's happening with what's the purpose of all that? Because somebody's pulling the levers somewhere, right? What are they doing with the content? What are they doing with what they learn, right? Like, because it all turns into very aggressive data points when you include an AI. Like, it can pull anything out of that. And so I'm wondering also, like, is there ill intent behind it? Like, ultimately, what's happening on the other side? Like, why did someone decide to do this? Now, if it's just a little science project for school, fine, right? But like, is there some sort of ill intent? And I really don't know. So I'm trying to figure out like where I stand with it. PodMatch is relatively safe from this sort of thing because it's, and you know this, Dave, like it's a completely paid network community. We call it like a premium community because everyone who's on it pays something. It might not be a lot, but we get gated from a lot of these things. But people that are relying on direct messages, like at some point when this becomes, someone will release a software that does all this for you and people will pay a subscription for it and they'll be mining the data. Then is it safe to respond? Yeah, I'll be a guest on your podcast through something like Instagram DMs, right? Like, are you running into the potential of you're just going to get mined for data from an AI that's feeding it back to a program that's then selling your data to company X that is interested. Like, I don't know. And I know I sound super extreme in saying this. I just think we need to all be really careful. AI is still really cool. It's really fun. It has a lot of really great applications, but just like anything, someone's going to twist it into something that's not good, right? Just like anything in life, like everything that even is meant for good, someone figures out how to do something bad with it. So I just want to kind of put this out there as a precaution. I don't really know how I feel yet, the stance that we're going to take as PodMatch with it, but it's something that's really on my mind right now a lot, Dave. So I thank you for letting us have the discussion here about this, because I think it's important that we at least voice this as the human element. I think that we really matter. We need to really protect and defend that.
Yeah. Alex, again, I told you we could talk all day. I would love to have time with you all day, but you are a very busy person and you've made time to do this, which I'm grateful for. The people I interact with in the podcasting space, when your name comes up, Alex, I've never heard an ill word of you ever from anyone. Everybody that I talk to praises what you do, what your team does, how you show up for us as podcasters. It is amazing to know that there's someone out there that has our back, especially for us indie podcasters who are a team of one, kind of slugging it out, and then we go to work at night and then come back and slug it out again. You're there creating tools for us to help us be more successful and to do more with less time. That's what I love about what your team does, and I'm happy to be part of that community. And I'm just grateful for all the things you do for us beyond just creating a platform and then set it and forget it. You're still there. You're helping us and you're walking with us in the journey as well. That's something that can't be overlooked. It can't be minimized. I'm really thankful for that. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of the people that I interact with who are like Dave. Make sure Alex and his team knows. Without them, I don't know if I'd be podcasting right now. So just thank you on behalf of the people that I represent that listen to the show. And I'm so grateful and thankful you have time to do this. Close off, Alex. It's your podcast now. I'm going to move to the passenger seat. Encourage a podcaster listening as we wrap up and promote PodMatch, whatever you need to do to wrap up. But your closing thoughts as we wrap up our time together.
Yeah, Dave, first and foremost, thank you for the kind words. I mean, listen, I didn't get into this to be liked. It obviously feels great to hear that, but I'm just glad to know I'm making a positive impact on some people's lives. And so thankful. So thank you for having me. The main thing I want to drive home to people is actually an episode of your podcast that I listened to this week. And the title is From Command to Connection. And it came out on September 30th, 2024. You were talking about this idea of, instead of a call to action, having a path to action. And man, that stood out to me, because immediately I'm like, okay, this is my call to action section. I'm like, no, this is the path to action, right? And it just gives you this different perspective on like how to form connection around what you do. So my call to action is to go listen to that episode. Go find it again, September 30th, 2024, From Command to Connection. Super good to listen to. Beyond that, just to kind of reinforce that point, and I think we've said this a lot throughout it, is to do for one what you wish you could do for all. Listen, I think we all want to change the world, right? Like, we all have the right heart in saying that, but what that actually means, I don't think many of us really take time to think about the meaning of that. If each and every one of us positively impacted the life of one person around us, tomorrow, the world would be completely different than it is today. And I think if we really want to change the world, we got to say, who's the one person that I can really serve today with what I do? If you're a podcast guest or host, think about that person listening. Forget the rest of the seats. There's one person in one seat that you know that you can help them experience that transformation through a human connection, right? That they need in their life to go further tomorrow than they are today. And so that's my encouragement to everyone. Think about the one person. Remember, you're doing it for them. And when you do, I find we actually impact more lives than just the one. But at the end of the day, all that's just icing on the cake. So Dave, thank you again. I really, really appreciate it.
It's amazing. Everyone go check out all the links in the show notes for PodMatch and all the interesting links that Alex has mentioned. We'd love for you to follow up. If you haven't signed up for PodMatch, go check it out. I think you'll love it, especially if you're an interview-based podcast. You're going to meet great people, and it really works well. I love how you offer up new people to us all the time, Alex, as potential guests, and we can go through and take a look at their stuff. And I really appreciate, again, all the things you do for us as podcasters. Thanks so much.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast all the way through to the end. I love having these great guest co-hosts on the show to share their podcast with you. You have some homework to do. And what I'm asking of you is to go check out our featured guest co-host today. Go over and listen to their podcast. The links are always in the show notes. And I'd love for you to go and give them your love and support. And I think if we can all do that for each other, podcasting will be a lot more fun for all of us. So it's time to do what you've asked others to do for you. It's time to do for this guest co-host. Links in the show notes. Go over and check out their show and leave them a review, do the follow, go listen to their episodes in full, the entirety of an episode, which again shows to the apps that it's a good podcast because you're going there and you're staying to the end. It's probably one of the best ways you can help a podcaster grow their audience and be shown to more people is by simply going and listening wherever you listen to the very end, like you're doing right now here. This is the perfect way to signal to wherever you're listening on, this is a podcast worth promoting. And all of the apps want you to stay on as long as possible. So go over and listen to our guest co-host episode and leave them some feedback. If they have a buy me a coffee, send them a coffee. If they have a speak pipe, send them a voice message. If they have an email, send them an email. If they're on Instagram, send them a direct message. Do something to support our guest co-hosts. They've given up their time to be here with you, to be here with me, and we can give that back to them with time and attention, our love, our support. Thank you for doing all that for me as well. Here on the How to Podcast series, we'll talk to you soon for our next episode.